coming on. I guess we'll get right to it. SEC Media Days was rolling right along, and then all of a sudden a report comes out that Oklahoma and Texas are interested in joining the SEC. Nobody really gives a flat denial of that. What's your read on that situation as we've had overnight to kind of digest that?
Yeah, I think you first look at the context in which the story was released, and that two teams reached out to the SEC to gauge interest. And, I mean, that's essentially me telling you that I've been shopping for Lamborghinis online. It's nice. It's something that everybody wants. It's something a lot of us want to have, but not sure how attainable it is right this second. I think there are a lot of things that could have been accomplished by that. You basically send a message to your league that you're not happy. You send a message to other leagues that may now be available. And obviously there's the possibility that there are some real conversations happening within the SEC, or at least that interest has been gauged and thrown out to begin those conversations. My understanding is that a lot of it is real. There is absolute fire where that smoke is. How far along it is, we don't necessarily know. How quickly this begins to move towards being a reality, I don't really know either. But conversations have at least been had, or at least that interest has been thrown out and made known. And I think ball right now is in the SEC's court. We'll see what they decide to do with it.
If this were to happen, Cole, I mean, what type of restructuring would we be looking at from a division standpoint, from a scheduling standpoint, or is that just so far out in the future it's impossible to guess?
I think first thing you do is you eliminate a non-conference game, because your inventory is going to be too valuable and there's going to be enough teams to be able to go around. And then obviously I think divisions would probably go away at that point, and you would look at some sort of a pod system as to how you would play and come up with a different way that you would determine the two teams that would play in the SEC championship game. So there are a lot of different ways you could do it, a lot of different ways you could manage it, a lot of different ways that would be good. But that's something that would take a lot of thought, because you would absolutely want to make sure you got every ounce of that inventory where television networks could utilize it.
And Cole, how much this has to do with the fact that, we're a couple of years away from potentially having a 12-team playoff, name and image likeness is changing the way student athletes can go out there and benefit from his or her, likeness. And then you look at the fact that Mark Emmert, he comes out and says, well, this could be the changing of the guards when you talk about college athletics as we know it. And as you mentioned, Texas and Oklahoma speaks, everybody listens, and the SEC is, the biggest and best conference in college football. You potentially add Oklahoma and Texas. What does that mean for, other conferences if and when they do decide to dissolve?
I think that's a big question is, if you're Bob Bowlesby, commissioner of the Big 12, and this were to happen, how do you counter that? Do you counter that? I mean, is he just immediately looking for another job? I don't know. My first call will be to the Pac-12 and say, is there a way for us to merge, come together, try to do something? I mean, even if that didn't happen, you're going to get cherry picked apart with a couple other schools. Somebody would want to bring in Kansas from a basketball perspective. And there are a couple other strong brands with what TCU has been able to accomplish. You look at what Texas Tech has done in basketball and baseball. They're going to offer you different things in different sports, but it would cause a domino effect that would be massive in college sports. I've said since the end of the national championship game in 2013 that we're sort of headed towards that seismic shift. And I think this would only be more evidence that it's very possible.
Cole, what's the SEC's interest in actually doing this, and could you actually kill the golden goose if you get too big?
Yeah, that's an interesting thought, and I do think you look at this and say you have to ask the question: is this the best thing for the overall greater good of the sport? Is this the best thing for the health of college football, collegiate athletics? And I don't know that. I do think there's a lot of people that are going to get really excited and say, yes, do it, bring them in, let's go. But I think you have to be fair and at least think about the other side of it and ask, is this what's best for college sports top to bottom? I don't know if that's a yes right now. As far as the SEC's interest, Greg Sankey has said multiple times, he said it on my show today, he doesn't have a comment on it. So I don't think anybody has real information on that.
Switching gears to the SEC for this fall, who do you think is the top contender to Alabama out west?
I've got LSU finishing second in the West. I think we completely discount their talent. I think they might have the best player in college football in Derek Stingley. Then you have Eli Ricks on the other side of corner. You got Jay Ward back in that secondary. Cordell Flotts back in that secondary. You signed the number one junior college linebacker in the country. You get a linebacker in Mike Jones, transfers in from Clemson. You have two big boy, real, physical, prototypical SEC defensive tackles in Neil Farrell and Glenn Logan. Olajari can get to the quarterback off the edge. Ali Gay can get to the quarterback off the edge. And then offensively, most of your offensive line is back. You have a receiver in Keyshawn Boutte that has more receiving yards in the SEC game than anybody in the history of the league. Dre Jenkins could be a solid weapon. I think Cole Taylor's a name to watch at tight end for LSU. I think he's a guy that could have a big year, 6'7", 255, 260. Love what I saw from him late when he had to play a little bit more. And then you're in a great quarterback spot. I think Max Johnson wins it, but I don't really think it makes a massive difference which guy ends up being the starter because you have two capable players. So I think LSU's in great shape. They're going to get things back to where they were, close to at least in 2019 as far as the systems, what they run, how they run it. And I think there'll be some familiarity with that. So I think they're hungry after last year. I think Ed O's hungry to prove some people wrong. And I think LSU's just being discounted. Now, I don't think A&M is going to be far off from that. And I think most teams in the West are trending up. But I give LSU just a little bit of a nod and think they finish right ahead of the Aggies.
New quarterback at Texas A&M. You're going to have the quarterback competition at LSU. Bryce Young is looked upon to be a star. Matt Corral gets to be another system in Lane Kiffin's offense. But, Cole, if Bo Nix, if they can find a way to figure out, he can get to the check down, obviously hand the ball off to Tank Bigsby, give the ball to him, even in those check downs. If he can come back his junior season and just find a way to fine-tune some things, how dangerous could he be as a player, and how good could he make Auburn this season?
Well, I think he's got plenty of talent. He can be a great player. The arm strength is there. You mentioned some of the mobility. It's underrated. Toughness we know is there. We know he's got grit. I mean, he's shown that. He just needs to be more presidential. He needs to play the position as it's meant to be played. He needs to be a quarterback, a leader, understand situational football, make better decisions, make smart decisions. And I think the quarterback acumen that is on that Auburn staff can help with that. When you think about Brian Harsin having coached it, played it, coordinated it. Mike Bobo coached it, coordinated it, played it. He brought his OC from Boise in to be an analyst on that staff. So they have enough people to be able to work with that position to make it go. It's the younger receiving core that I'm a little bit concerned about. Can Elijah Canyon be that guy? Can Xavier Capers be that guy? Yeah, Demetrius Robertson coming over from Georgia might help a little bit, but he's not a number one, a true guy that's going to make a big difference. So I think you still have to find who are your receivers going to be that can make a difference. O-line will be okay with the new stretch scheme that's going to be implemented. They're not going to be great, but they can go with what they have there. Tank's going to be Tank. I think he's the best returning running back in the SEC, and I think the defense will be solid. Bo Nix has got to find a way to take the step. The body language needs to be better. The understanding of the position and how the position is meant to be played on every down has got to improve.
We're talking with Cole Cubelic, SEC Network, former Auburn Tiger, here on 3 and Out. And Cole, what team, as you've had a chance to see him come through this week, do you think is going to be kind of that biggest wild card in the SEC where they're not maybe going to win it, but they'll upset a lot of people's seasons?
I think if we're talking about a team that will exceed expectations, I think it's going to be Mississippi State. When they injected the youth on offense late last year, they were different. They became a different team. It looked the way it was supposed to look, running that air raid. Jaden Wally at receiver, Clavius Marks at running back, and then obviously Will Rogers was the guy that continued to grow throughout the course of the season. You watched the Georgia game. I mean, he made some amazing throws in that game. Offensive line should be better. I think they need to cut the splits down. Technically, fundamentally, need to make some adjustments because they're not dealing with the defensive linemen in this league very well. They lose their leadership on defense, but I think they have a lot of production back. And I love Zach Arnett. He throws everything at you. So for me, they're not going to win the West, but I think Mississippi State probably exceeds expectations the most.
If Georgia's going to reach that national championship level, make the playoff, what must the Bulldogs do?
Offensive line needs to gain continuity quickly. I think the offensive line that plays the best in the season opener wins that game between Georgia and Clemson because they're two of the better defensive lines in college football. They have talent. I mean, Jamari Saylor's played a lot. Xavier Truss is a guy that looks like he's going to be a great player. They just hadn't played a ton of snaps together. They haven't all been on the field at the same time, and having to mix and match that, having to move guys around, I think has them lacking chemistry right now. If you're going to be a good offensive line, you got to know how to play together. You got to play as one. And I don't know if that group has that right now. The running back stable's there. There's enough at receiver. Tight end, obviously, going to be dangerous. Love the defensive line. Love the edge defenders. You've added some guys in the secondary. They're going to fill voids there. And you got a quarterback that can take you to a national championship game. He's got to have protection. He's got to have a run game. And he's got to have the potential to generate more explosive plays. The offensive line is the way that all those things can happen. If they do come together, Georgia's got a chance to be the best offensive line in the league. It's just right now, I haven't seen them work together as one enough to truly believe that they're there.
And Cole, finally, with everything that happened in 2020, from the hashtag we want to play to now you talk about name and image likeness, that you being able to do games with nobody in the stands, some guys are doing games from home because of the COVID-19, to finally have some of those things behind us, to have packed stadiums. What is Cole Kubelik looking forward to the most opening weekend?
Probably just when I whatever stadiums I do roll into, just seeing packed sidewalks, packed streets, seeing RVs, seeing tailgate tents, seeing people walking around, because it wasn't the lack of people in the stands wasn't the weirdest part for me last year. The weirdest part for me was to be able to go down College Street in Auburn, Alabama, and pull right up to the stadium and have no traffic, not have to wait for people to cross the road, to not see people tailgating, to not see any RVs. I mean, I roll into Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I don't smell any gumbo. I don't smell any food. I don't see people with their face painted. I don't see people yelling at each other. I go into Lexington, Kentucky, and I take the first parking spot right up there next to the stadium, and I walk in with no traffic. Those are the things that I'm excited to see different, because those atmospheres are what make the SEC great.
Cole Kubelik, our guest here on 3 and Out. Cole, really appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Cole Kubelik, former Auburn Tiger, now with the SEC Network, our guest here on 3 and Out. So much more to come here on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to be here with you on this Thursday. Kevin, BJ, and Ben. Glad you're making us a part of your day. A lot to get to here on 3 and Out. Thanks to Cole Kubelik for joining us. We'll hear from Jim Nagy, Drew DeArmond, talking some Alabama football on the show. Jake Crane, Matt Smith will check in with us as well. Aaron Murray, former Georgia Bulldog quarterback. We'll hear from him on 3 and Out today as we lead you up to Atlanta Braves baseball. We are expected to be joined by Sean Elliott, head football coach of the Georgia State Panthers here in just a little bit. They are at Sunbelt Media Days today, and Sean Elliott, maybe with one of the more challenging schedules they've had at Georgia State, BJ.
Yeah, you play Army, North Carolina, and Auburn out of conference. And then you have Louisiana and Arkansas State over from the West. So, yeah, very challenging schedule for the Panthers.
And we are joined now by the head football coach of the Georgia State Panthers in his 5th year there in Atlanta. Sean Elliott joins us. Coach, welcome to the show. How are you?
Man, I'm doing great. How are you?
Hey, we are doing fantastic. You get ready to start your 5th year there at Georgia State, and a lot of folks talking about what may be an exciting but maybe one of the most challenging schedules the program has had so far.
Oh, without a doubt. We've got one heck of a football team. We've got a great group of players, men, our roster, and within our football program, we're excited about the season. We do have a challenging schedule, but it's an exciting schedule. We've got some really, really good football teams, a competitive conference, and we're just looking forward to the 2021 season like never before.
Coach, take us back to the end of last year, and you beat South Alabama, you beat Georgia Southern, you win the bowl game over Western Kentucky. Did that give you guys some momentum moving forward?
It's always good to win, but we thought we were a good football team throughout the course of the season, to tell you the truth. We certainly did end on a strong note, and we always want to do that. We've got a pretty confident football team, but I think the season in general, I think with all the distractions and just the various things that went on throughout the course of the year, we gained confidence each and every week, and it wasn't just the wins that gave us the confidence. It was overcoming a lot of things from a year ago. So I think we have a confident roster. I think our players are motivated and inspired to go out and do great things this season.
I mean, Coach, all 11 of the starters coming back on offense, returning 7 starters on defense. You return your place kicker. You got an offense that averaged 33.3 points a game. It's got to feel good knowing that you got a bunch of guys that was on last year's team to be able to kind of bring those young guys along.
I couldn't hear the last part of it, but I think you were talking about just the overall depth of our team and the excitement that we have coming back. Am I correct in that?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I am. But you have to put the brakes on the excitement, to tell you the truth. This is a whole new year, a whole new season. But one thing that hasn't changed is not a whole lot of new players. We've got, like you said, 11 starters back offensively. We do have 9 of 11 back defensively. We have our place kicker. We have our punter. We have everyone on our coaching staff other than 2 individuals that we had to replace. So we do feel confident. It's pleasuring to know that you have such a senior-laden team, because you have super seniors that are coming back, and then you have those rising juniors that are actually stepping into that senior role as well. So we have a lot of great leadership.
And Coach, speak to that as far as preparing for the season, getting just about everybody back, your quarterback back, your offensive front is either upperclassmen or guys who started a lot of games for you. Probably not a whole lot of install going in, just cleaning up a lot of what you guys do well, it sounds like.
Yeah, you're exactly right. One of the great things about our spring practice is I could sit back and let our coaches, I could watch our coaches and witness our players teaching and leading themselves. And anytime you get a player-led team, that's a good thing. I mean, we've got, like I said, we've got a lot of experience, but we have a lot of maturity back. I mean, these guys are older because of the year of extra eligibility for our super seniors. It's very comforting to know that we have all that.
Coach, talk about your quarterback, Quad Brown, and what he brings to the offense and the type of talent he is.
Well, Quad Brown brings back for a sophomore campaign. He's going to be a redshirt sophomore. I thought he had a really good season a year ago. He had some turnovers that he was trying to make too many plays for whatever reason, just trying to make plays. When you're young, you try to do that. He's got more experience. You know, he's got 10 games up under his belt. He's got a whole off season that he's been through. He's learned and been in the fire of our conference play. So I expect a big year out of him. And he's got such a great personality, great work ethic. I think he's really going to shine this year. He's going to be one of those players that you turn on the television and he's put up really big numbers and making a lot of exciting plays.
And Coach, with everything that you guys had to deal with in 2020, to still have a 9-3 season, it's got to feel good to be getting back to a little bit of normalcy here in 2021.
Well, you know, I tell our team all the time, I said, normalcy is what you make of it. And I said, so, you know, once we got into a rhythm last year, that was our norm. That was our normal. And we kind of, we harped on that all the time. Even though we were testing, that was normal last year. Fighting, you know, various things on and off the field, that was the norm last year. So we were able to really, really calm ourselves, have a great even keel mind, and attack it. But, you know, as far as getting back to maybe fans in the stands, the COVID protocols maybe being lifted because of the vaccinations, and really kind of moving forward like we always have used to do that, then yes, we are thrilled to be doing that.
Sean Elliott, Georgia State head football coach, joining us here on 3 and Out. And Coach, you were picked, I think, preseason third by the SEC, or the Sun Belt media there as well. Speak to just being on that side with yourself, with Appalachian State, Coastal Carolina, Georgia Southern. I mean, a lot of great teams on your side of the conference that you guys have to battle each and every week.
Our conference, top to bottom, is phenomenal. The East, the West. You know, every team in this league has the opportunity to come up and bite you each and every week, and you know that's some of the things that makes our league so special. We have tremendous coaches, we have tremendous players in our staff. The recruiting is an all-time high. If you look at our teams from a year ago, Coastal Carolina and Louisiana were ranked in the top 20. What a phenomenal year that Coastal had. You know, they were picked last going into last fall, so you don't have a whole lot to really put in those preseason rankings, but we do have a special league with special players, and the universities in this league are top notch, and we're just thrilled to be a part of the Sun Belt Conference.
And Coach, you mentioned the recruiting. You're a program, you guys have a lot of momentum, a lot of energy. What's it like, the facilities, obviously, to be a part of a program that has so much excitement, so much momentum moving forward?
Well, you know, it's great to be a part of it. You have a great message that you can send to recruits, that you can always talk about. You know, talk about doing things for the first time. This football program, this university has never been and won the Sun Belt Championship, but we're right on the horizon of doing that. You can see the gleams in the eyes of our players, and when we talk to our recruits about what we're trying to do and trying to accomplish, and they're going to be able to do things they're going to be remembered the rest of their lives. They get that same bright light in their eyes, and it's just fun to see, fun to go out and talk about, because we do have, I mean, what a huge future ahead of us here at Georgia State. And this is just our 12th year of playing football. You know, to think we've been to bowl games 3 out of the last 4 years, won our last bowl game against Western Kentucky in the Lending Tree Bowl this past December. Yeah, a lot of great things are going on here in Atlanta.
And Coach, even speak to the fact that, you know, with everything going on in college football, the one thing that has changed is the role of the student athlete. You talk about name and image likeness, these young people being able to go out to benefit from that, you know, from their name and their image. How has that changed the way in which you go about, you know, handling these type things? Even though this is different for you, different for the players, you got to feel good about the fact that these young people getting to kind of expand their role.
You know, certainly, I'm all for it. Listen, if you've worked hard and you've gained success in your life and you're able to go out and do something with it to benefit yourself or your family, hey, that's what this life's about. I think that's the American dream, isn't it? So I'm all for it. I mean, without a doubt. You know, things have changed a lot since I was a college football player. You know, I was just hoping to maybe get a drink down there at the local hot dog stand for a good game on Saturday or something like that. And that was phenomenal back then. But these guys have really come a long way. College football is changing every single minute of every single day, and it will continue to do so. I just want these guys, if it does happen the way I see it happening around the country, I want them to be smart. I want them to associate themselves with good people in the business world, because once you start talking about money and you start talking about making profits, and sometimes big profits, there's going to be a lot of people pulling on your strings.
Sean Elliott, our guest here on 3 and Out, and Georgia State opens up against Army on September 4th. Coach, really appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Hey, thank you guys, man. Anytime, and go Panthers.
Sean Elliott, our guest here on 3 and Out, head coach at Georgia State. And BJ, one of the more challenging schedules in the country, not just for the history of Georgia State, but Army, North Carolina, who's going to be a highly rated program, at Auburn. And then you get your crossover game in conference is Louisiana, who's going to be good. Then, of course, Coastal App, Georgia Southern on your side of the conference. Very, very challenging schedule for Georgia State there.
Well, and then you think about Georgia State opening up with Army. A couple of years ago, you and I were at that game. It was a great game, back and forth. The Panthers won by a touchdown. It was raining that night in Atlanta. But, yeah, looking forward to watching Georgia State this year.
Georgia State gonna have to definitely earn it this year. I mean, Kevin, you mentioned the crossover with Louisiana. I think they get Louisiana and Coastal Carolina in back-to-back weekends, starting off with Army, a team. After was a great game, BJ, as you mentioned 2 years ago. But Coach Elliott seems to be a guy to have, this young, Georgia State team, moving in the right direction. 9-3 last year is going to be very tough to repeat that. Have a repeat, a success like they did a year ago. But I think they up for the challenge.
And we've got more to come here on 3 and Out. We'll look at SEC expansion. What? When we come back, it's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you here, 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Kevin, BJ, and Ben. SEC Media Days going on. Just so much happening there in Hoover this week around SEC football and college football in general. And, well, we may have lost him. We'll try to get him back on the phone. We were trying to check in with our own Christian Gokel from SEC Media Days. And luck would have it sometimes, BJ, you go and he's gone. So that's what happens from time to time. But certainly the SEC, we started talking football, and then Nick Saban drops the name, image, likeness thing. Then all of a sudden, the Houston Chronicle drops their report, and the whole thing gets turned upside down because now everybody's 100% on college football expansion.
And not only college football expansion, but you're talking about two of the most iconic programs in the history of college football, right? You're not only talking about
with BJ, not sure why we aren't hearing him, but Ben, college football expansion. We'll check with BJ here in a second, but college football expansion, obviously a huge talking point.
Yes, I mean, I think yesterday with everything going on with Nick Saban and Alabama being controlling the show, I think what happened was you hear the reports of Oklahoma and Texas potentially flirting with the idea of coming to the SEC. Obviously, that's huge news. The SEC doesn't need anything else to add to it, but if you can add Oklahoma and Texas, Kevin and BJ, I think that's going to be a great thing. Not going to be good for the Big 12, but going to be great. I don't know if the rich are getting richer. I think the rich, I think they just bought a bank at that point.
We have found Christian Gokel. He joins us here on 3 and Out as, again, Christian, BJ had been here with us. SEC expansion took over kind of like the last couple of days. What did the scene turn like yesterday when that report dropped from the Houston Chronicle?
Well, you guys have done SEC Media Days before, so you kind of know what this. And when he's walking through Radio Row, it was that, but instead of fans and reporters, it was beat writers following Greg Sankey around, following him to all of his Radio Row hits. I thought it was pretty funny because so many of the radio guys you have to ask, and you just heard him say no comment 7 different times. When he sits down on your show, you have to ask about it. Same response every single time. It dominated yesterday and into this morning at SEC Media Days.
And Christian, with the possibility of Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC, you're talking about seismic moves. I mean, how viable would this be, and what would it do to the SEC? Would it get rid of divisions? Would it create kind of a 4-division format, or is that all speculation now?
Sorry, BJ, I missed the question there, man. I'm driving through South Alabama, so service might not be great.
No, I got you. I was just asking, when you talk about Texas and Oklahoma being two of the iconic brands in college football, huge fan bases, if they were to join the SEC, what would that do to the SEC, not only in terms of the brand, but would it get rid of division formats, or are we just guessing at this point?
I'll start with the second question there. I think the most realistic situation would be the 14 pods is what you'd be looking at there. So you'd have 3 other teams in your pod that you would play every year. And it'd be a 9-game schedule, and so you'd go through the other pods. And I think the way it works out is, worst case scenario, you're hosting every team in the SEC at least once every 4 years. So that's I think the football side of it would work out. In terms of the brand for the SEC, Kevin and I were talking about this a little while ago. I think it'd be massive for the SEC, not just for football, but softball, basketball would be huge with Texas and Oklahoma. For the SEC, I think it's a win. I think it's if you're Oklahoma, you're Texas, and you have this brand where you are the premier top of the line, where you are, you're blue blood. You are what you are you're the crown jewel in the Big 12. You're not the crown jewel in the SEC, Texas. Like, it's Alabama, and you're fighting for second, maybe third, fourth. You got to get past Florida. You have to get past Georgia in terms of the public perception in the SEC. So I think there's a lot of stuff to be considered, but mainly right now what's being considered is cash.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I mean, you think about now, Christian, with the TV deals going on right now with the SEC network, you look at all these media days going on at the same time. The SEC network is dominating. When you think about, Alabama might be they are the best football team in college football, but when you talk about brands, Oklahoma and Texas, that's about as big as a brand as you're going to see in college football. What type of TV deals you think could potentially happen when you add 2 brands like that to an already dominant or the most dominant conference?
I think fiscally, they already said if you add Oklahoma and Texas, if you add those two teams, each school inside the SEC would receive an additional $10 million, I believe at least, every year from their TV deals, the way the contract would work out. But we keep talking about Oklahoma and Texas, and they are absolutely blue bloods. And if you add them to your lineup there in the SEC, you probably have half the blue bloods inside of college football in your conference. But I think Kevin hit on this. Do you kill the golden goose? Because I kind of think what makes college football great is it's spread out, right? There you can kind of talk about Texas if you're an SEC fan, but you don't really think about it throughout the whole year, but you kind of see them peripherally, right? They just kind of become another school, I think, when you join the SEC. I don't think Texas is any bigger in terms of, and if we're talking college football, I don't think Texas is bigger or better than Florida. And they're certainly not bigger or better than Alabama. They haven't been relevant in a decade. Oklahoma's been in the college football playoff a bunch, but we're talking about college football. It helps your wallet. I don't think it helps your college football team if you're Oklahoma or Texas if you join the SEC.
Yeah, it's going to be absolutely crazy to see what happens. But Christian, obviously you look at the SEC this week, and what were the other takeaways besides obviously something that could happen in 2025? What was kind of your big takeaway from the week there in Hoover?
Brian Harsin has an amazing set of lungs. His opening statement was 16 minutes long. It was truly unbelievable. I'm so excited to stop when I get home. I'm just going to copy and paste the transcript. Maybe, BJ, you can do this for me in a break. Just copy and paste the transcript for Brian Harsin's press conference. I want to know how many words he spoke to that press conference, because I would bet everything in my bank account he spoke more words than any other coach there. He answered 3 questions. Typically, you have 15 minutes, 20 minutes to answer questions from the press. He answered 3 questions. It was really phenomenal to watch him say absolutely nothing while saying a ton of different words. Nick Saban, I thought, stole the show before the show even started with the Bryce Young news that he had coming close or was over 7 figures in money already from name, image, and likeness. I thought that was massive. Mike Leach and Sam Pittman, very similar in what they said about their programs, just in different roundabout ways. Both of them feel like they are being underrated in terms of, we're talking about people who could push to get higher up in the SEC West. I'm not saying Mississippi State or Arkansas will be challenging Bama, but they both could be really good football teams coming up. And then in the East, I thought it was interesting that Eli Drinkwitz came in and nobody really talking about Missouri. And man, he came in, big smile on his face, super relaxed, super calm, and all the confidence in the world in Connor Bazelak, his quarterback. He's got a really good defensive line out there. So I think the story is we think we know who the competitors are going to be in the West and the East to Alabama and Georgia, but I think some people walked away with some different perceptions on some of these teams.
How would you evaluate, Christian, the messaging from the new coaches with Heupel, Lee, and obviously Harsin, who you referenced?
To me, because I just have a different sense of humor than most people, my favorite line of the whole week was Clark Lee saying, "We won't apologize for being Vanderbilt." Like, it's like someone's asking them to apologize for being Vanderbilt. There's something to apologize for. But I really, out of all the new coaches, I liked what Clark Lee had to say the most. He said, "We're not looking at our past," and I was like, "That's probably a good thing," because there ain't a whole lot to look at back there. So we're not looking there. And then he brought quote unquote his helmet from his time at Vanderbilt, which for a fullback, it was a mighty clean helmet there from Clark Lee. But no, he's I guess he's saying what every new coach says, but he's bringing a different mentality to the football program. But you can see he has a true love for Vanderbilt in the city of Nashville. I mean, obviously it's his alma mater, but he has a genuine love for the school he's going to play or going to coach at. Josh Heupel, you can say his offense is going to be exciting and upbeat. I don't really think he was. I thought just kind of showed up, something I got to do. I'll go talk to these press folks, and we'll do it. I thought the coaches that I don't want to say Josh Heupel doesn't get it, but I think some coaches took advantage of this more than others. Nick Saban used SEC media days as a recruiting opportunity with name, image, and likeness, right? He kept thanking the media. He said, "Thank you guys for being here. Thank you so much. You guys proliferate what we do, and college football would be college football without you. I'm not saying that because I appreciate him thanking me. I know Nick Saban doesn't care about me at all, but the point he was making was these guys are going to start making money in college football. They don't do that. It's not worth as much without people like SouthernPigskin.com consistently putting out stories about college football, without us right now having this conversation right here. And so we're glad to see a little bit more out of that, out of Josh Heupel there. And then Shane Beamer, confidence, man. And there's a difference between fake confidence and actual confidence. You can tell Shane Beamer is a dude who was coached in Georgia. His dad had done it for decades, one of the best to ever do it in Frank Beamer. And then out at Oklahoma, in his time there, he's just been on winning programs and winning programs. I think there's a real confidence in Shane Beamer. And then he's obviously coached with a bunch of different head coaches. Kirby Smart, he's coached with Sam Pittman in his time at Georgia there. They were all asking about him. They all said the same thing. It's kind of smart. They were like, South Carolina got this one right. And I think that's going to be music to South Carolina fans' ears, because I don't think there's anything gimmicky about going out and hiring Shane Beamer. I know it's a little bit underwhelming to a lot of people, but just a huge confidence in Shane Beamer from a lot of these coaches in the SEC.
I mean, Christian, the guy that I thought really took advantage of his opportunity was Kirby Smart. I mean, a lot of time, obviously, Kirby knew that coming in, they were going to be talked about to win the East, to run away with the East, with what they was able to do in the transfer portal and JT Daniels. But him talking about spending time with his kids, talking about being in Augusta, talking about the lady asking him about, what did he do for a living with people, asking him to sign autographs. Because too often at times, we dehumanize coaches, dehumanize players. We see them as these figures that go out there and entertain us. I thought it was cool that he was saying, look, I know that I'm the guy with the visor that's leading the University of Georgia trying to get back to the promised land, but I'm a dad first, and and I want to be able to be around my kids as much as possible. I thought that was great of him, just talking about the fact that I'm not all football 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
Yeah, I thought a lot of stuff Kirby Smart said was pretty cool. He really didn't talk about his team too much. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because at the end he said, listen, I didn't really talk about the depth chart or anything, so I know you guys are going to ask me about that. Not really knowing that everybody just wanted to ask you about name, image, and likeness and all that stuff. Thank God the Texas-Oklahoma news hadn't broken yet, because that's all we would have heard there too. But really the statement from Kirby Smart that I thought stuck out to me, just because we all have our generalized perceptions about people and about their jobs and about different ways of life. And so we think, say, Georgia coach, right? Pressure, just intense amount of pressure. We see it happen. We saw it happen with Mark Richt, saw it happen with Kirby Smart, where it's like the President of the United States. You see them when they get into office to when they leave office. It takes its toll, man. But Kirby Smart said, he's like, listen, I'm too busy. I'm too busy to feel it. I'm too busy to feel your expectations for what Georgia's supposed to be. And I think that's the reality, because Sam Pittman, I thought, kind of hammered it home today when they asked him about what he learned from his time at Georgia. He said, when you're a coach of the University of Georgia, you're a player at the University of Georgia, every single second of every single day is fourth down in inches, right? Like, Kevin, what are you going to do? You're going to claw for that inch, right? Every single day is fourth and inches for Georgia. They don't do anything where it's like, all right, we can take a breath. We can sort of slow down for a second. As soon as that bowl game's over, you're recruiting people, right? So I thought that was really interesting from Kirby Smart and then from Sam Pittman that, listen, there's no break. If Alabama is the standard, you have to scrap and claw for every single advantage you can get to catch up with Alabama, because you might only get 99% of the way there, but you have to be at that 99% if you're going to take advantage of the opportunity to beat them when it presents itself.
Our own Christian Gokel joining us here. He's been at SEC Media Days all week. Christian, thanks so much. We'll talk soon, man.
All right, fellas, I'll be listening.
All right, Christian Gokel joining us here on 3 and Out. We'll come back with more all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you here on this Thursday, Kevin, BJ, and Ben, as we look at SEC Media Days. Our own Christian Gokel was on hand as we just talked to him, had a chance to catch up with Aaron Brule, a linebacker at Mississippi State, and talk about the Bulldogs in year 2 under Mike Leach.
Christian Gokel at SEC Media Days 2021, walking and talking with Mississippi State linebacker Aaron Brule. Aaron, 3-3-5 stack, really a different defense than we see anywhere else in college football. What does that free you up to do as a linebacker?
As I've been seeing like last year and stuff like that, it gives a lot more freedom for me to really do whatever I want. Coach Arnett does a great job implementing the defense for all of our guys and finding ways to attack people on different angles and stuff like that. And I think this leading up to the second year we have here, it'll be a great time for defense.
Pernell McPhee, Darius Slay, Fletcher Cox. Do we talk about enough how good of a NFL production on the defensive side that Mississippi State puts out?
Defensively, as we may know, like we put guys into the league, and if anyone wants to come to Mississippi State, this is the place to come defensively wise and now offensively wise with the extreme amount of exciting things that Coach Leach brings to offenses.
Full offseason to really work in with this scheme and in this system, not just defensively, but offensively as well for your team. How much growth have you seen, and what should fans expect out of your team in 2021?
You should expect an extremely hard-working team. Piggybacking off of last year, we know Coach Leach always wins everywhere he is. So I think leading into year 2 and second year, we'll do great things.
And there's Aaron Brule, linebacker, Mississippi State. BJ, where do you think Mike Leach has him in year 2?
It's a team nobody wants to play. I mean, it's a tough matchup. And Ben, you heard him there mention the 3-3-5. What type of challenges does that present for an offense?
It's really difficult because the 3-3-5 just simply means you're trying to have more speed on the field at all given times. And then when you have a 3-3-5, those guys can always be interchangeable. You can go from a 3-3-5 to a 4-3. And you're able to, have more of a blitz package. Mississippi State is always going to be known for what they do offensively. And when you look at the fact that once this offense got to get going, it's going to make it so that defense plays even better. But yeah, you mentioned the Fletcher Cox, you remember the Darius Slade. You got some big time players, all pro caliber players that's come through Mississippi State. I think that Mike Leach, if he can start playing more this time complementary offense, is only going to make the defense much better.
And we've got so much more to get to here on 3 and Out. We'll hear from Mike Leach. We'll hear from Jake Crane, host of the J-Boy Show. Jim Nagy of the Senior Bowl will join us. Drew DeArmond, though, will join us when we come back from Tighter Insider. We'll talk some Alabama football with him. It is 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Hit us up on Twitter at Pigskin Radio. Back to 3 and Out here on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Kevin Thomas, BJ Bennett, Ben Troop, glad you are with us here on the show. SEC Media Days, getting you ready for the start of college football season. It doesn't get any bigger than Nick Saban when he takes a turn in front of the media. Here to tell us about that and more from 97.7 The Zone in Huntsville, and Tighter insider Drew DeArmond joins us here on 3 and Out. Drew, welcome to the show. How are you?
Good, guys. Great to be back with you.
And Nick Saban made news before Alabama even had their day at Media Days with talking about he didn't say which quarterback by name, I guess, saying his quarterbacks had a 7-figure NIL deal. But Nick Saban, man, he is the rock star still of the SEC, no question about it.
Yeah, no doubt. It's kind of like Elvis every year when he enters the building and then when he leaves. There's a different energy, certainly here in Hoover today. And yesterday, he was kind of a story, even without being here. You know, he talked about, the NIL deal for Bryce Young, who hasn't even started a game. He's only played in 7 games, and that's 22 pass attempts roughly. And so he kind of hinted strongly that he was putting together a lot of NIL deals, and it was really a conversation up and down Radio Row. And so it's really interesting that Coach Saban would let that cat out of the bag, but I think he recruited Texas really well last year. He's doing it again, and it was calculated. And he was in front of some Texas high school coaches. He's going to continue to recruit Texas very aggressively, even with Steve Sarkisian, his former assistant now at the University of Texas, and his other former assistant, Jimbo Fisher at A&M. But again, he wants to make his presence known, and he certainly did yesterday and earlier today.
We've heard a couple of different pundits say this week, if you're going to get Alabama, this better be the year. And we've all said, hey, you look at this team with Coach Saban, it's still extremely talented. Do you think there could be any truth to that idea that maybe this could be the year to get Alabama?
Well, I do think they're going to have the best defense in the SEC, along with Georgia and then probably Texas A&M. I think with Henry To'oTo'o coming in, with the performance of Jalen Armour-Davis at the other corner spot vacated by Patrick Surtain, and Kool-Aid McKinstry, the freshman, I don't see a lot of weakness in this defense. It's probably the deepest and most talented since 2016. You have a great place kicker in Will Reichert, but offensively, you did lose a lot of talent. Now, they have a lot of unproven talent that's ready to, I think, shine like a Bryce Young, like a Jace McClellan at running back behind Brian Robinson. But again, it is unproven. And so they've got, a couple of 2 tough games in their first 3. You got to play Miami, who may be kind of laying in the weeds a little bit in Atlanta. And then you've got to play a Florida team in the swamp where you hadn't played them in 10 years. They've got Emory Jones. They're going to have a completely different offense. Should be 2-0 when they play Alabama. So I could see there could be some validity to that, but I will say, I still think when you look at it, from 1 through 12 in the regular season, Alabama is going to be favored in every game, and I think they're going to have the most talented roster. But what is the injury luck going to look like, and what is the chemistry going to look like? And that's the questions that need to be answered.
And Drew, I know that when you think about the most highly sought after position in college football got to be the offensive coordinator position at, the University of Alabama this year. Bill O'Brien. I mean, obviously with his way of calling plays, how integral could an offense get? I know last year with Sarkisian, they was a master at using the pre-snap motion to get guys kind of outflanking the defense. Do you see them kind of sticking with some of what Sark did, or do you see it just being a complete blow up and going what Bill O'Brien wants to do?
Well, no, I think it's even Nick Saban said today, the offense is not going to change. They have a good offense. They have a good offensive scheme. Now, I do think there's going to be some wrinkles added by Bill O'Brien. And Bill O'Brien, as you know, Ben, you played in the NFL, you know him, you've seen him. He likes to feature the tight end. Now, Jaleel Billingsley became a big part of the offense when Jalen Waddle went down last year. I think he'll continue to be a big part of it. But I think they're also going to ingratiate a guy like Cameron Latu into it, who's someone that moved from outside linebacker to tight end. He's taken a couple years to develop. He's going to be more your inline guy, but I know he's someone that Bill O'Brien identified as soon as he got there as someone that could make plays. You saw him have that 50-plus yard touchdown in the A-Day game, the only touchdown pass for Bryce Young. I think you might see more 2 tight end sets, and I think they're definitely going to run the football some to take pressure off Bryce Young and, a revamped offensive line, get them some confidence. But I definitely think you'll see some new wrinkles, such as 2 tight ends, such as Latu and Jaleel Billingsley being an even bigger part of the offense than they were a year ago.
Drew DeArmond joining us here on 3 and Out, Tighter Insider. And Drew, you look at Alabama, known for defense. Where's this stack up with some of Nick Saban's defensive units that he's had?
Oh, I think it's the most talented group since 2016. They're going to rotate at least two full units on the D line. I know they're very excited about Tim Smith and LeBron Ray being healthy, and Byron Young. I think they think they've got a lot of good young defensive linemen that they're going to use. I think as far as edge pass rushers, it's probably the deepest group I've ever seen at Alabama. I still think Will Anderson, the National Defensive Freshman of the Year last year, Chris Allen, steady as she goes, returning a senior, combo of outside backers in the country. But they've got some guys behind him that can really play with not a lot of drop-off. Drew Sanders, sophomore from the state of Texas, is a really good athlete. And remember the name Chris Braswell from St. Francis High School in Baltimore, Maryland, powerhouse program. He had a really good spring. I think he can rush off the edge as well. They've got guys like King Makuta, who may come back out of the transfer portal, who is a good player, and Quandarius Robinson. So I think they've got a lot of young guys, even a guy like Keanu Coote, who's a true freshman. So they've got a depth at the outside edge, and I think they're going to be able to pressure QBs, which is going to help that secondary, which has a lot of returning experience, that, as we said earlier, is going to have a new starter back there at corner.
You've heard a lot of people ask, hey, can Alabama replace a first-round pick at quarterback, 2 first-round picks at receiver, and still, win the title? Well, they did it last year. How does this team lose so much talent every year, have coaching changes every other year, amongst the staff, and the end result's the same? You're either right there playing for a championship or winning a championship. I mean, first and foremost, I think it's a consistency we kind of take for granted. But what do you think is the biggest reason for that ability to just stay there at the top of the national polls?
Well, I mean, it's the old adage, the head of the snake is still there, and that's Nick Saban. He's the mastermind behind it all. He's the best I've ever seen at having a plan as an organization from the top down, and being able to build a coaching staff, have an idea of what he wants from a cohesion standpoint. And he has enough skins on the wall that NFL head coaches like a Bill O'Brien, like a Doug Marrone will come work for him, because they also know if they have success, they're going to have other opportunities after that. So I just think that's the consistency in it. And he puts such an emphasis on recruiting. He's one of the first guys that started the analyst situation, where you have off-field coaches breaking down film, giving you an edge. And then in recruiting, he's always put an emphasis on it, always spends so much time on it himself as a head coach. He's probably the best evaluator in college football. That's why you see guys like Josh Jacobs, who are 3-star athletes, who they sign late, who they develop into a first-round draft choice. Even Jaleel Billingsley, he took a couple of years, but he's a really good player who they found in Chicago. So, and he casts a wide net. He doesn't just keep it in the Southeast. He recruits coast to coast now. He's got the pipeline going in California and in Texas. So really, it all goes back to recruiting and evaluating. And Nick Saban spends more time than any head coach doing it. That's why they created the bump rule, because Nick Saban was out working coaches on the road, and he's just relentless. And that's why Alabama can fill those slots as a coach, even on and off the field, because he also has to replace a lot of analysts. But he does that every year. And again, they continue to recruit. And honestly, guys, I know this sounds blasphemous because he's recruited so well since 2008. But I honestly think it's what you've seen in the last 2 years, the recruiting is starting to go to the next level, because I think he has the best, grasp on name, image, and likeness of any head coach out there. He's going to embrace it, and it's going to make Alabama even tougher to deal with in recruiting.
And Drew, even sticking with a guy like Nick Saban, I mean, his ability to adjust. I know that when it comes to a guy that's really done it all in college football, he's always trying to make sure he's staying ahead of the curve. You talk about him being able to bring in the analysts, and now other coaches where other schools around the nation are doing it. But I saw something he said about Musa Muhammad when he had him in Michigan State, and saying how, everybody wanted to kind of get rid of the player. And you look at what Musa Muhammad was able to do once he got drafted. Just talk about his ability to understand players. A lot of times people think, oh, you had to be in the locker room, you had to be a great player to be a head coach, to be a player's coach. Is he reshaping how we look at the term player's coach?
Well, I think he's always evolving, Ben, and I think that's what makes him the greatest to ever do it. As far as just like with name, image, and likeness, how he handled COVID and the protocols. Alabama as a football team and an organization handled it better than anyone, because they were able to seamlessly transition when he had to miss a game. He missed the Iron Bowl. Don't forget that. And yet they still pound Auburn in Tuscaloosa with Steve Sarkisian, as the acting head coach. I think what Nick Saban has done, the Musa Muhammad is a great example. A lot of people wanted him kicked off the team. But of course, he went to Massim. He disciplined him, but he came back. He became a great player at Michigan State for him in East Lansing. He went on to have a lengthy pro career, playing the Super Bowl. Now he owns his own business. He has several kids who are going to be, and they're growing now. He said he's going to have all his children go to college and develop as people. So again, it's about how you react to adversity. And Nick Saban's still doing that at Alabama. He still helps young men who have substance abuse issues, who have personal issues. He covers the whole person. He has a great relationship with Chris Herron. He has an outstanding, rehab facility for those with those kind of issues. He's always thinking ahead. He's never complacent. And I think complacency is what really can really quickly end a dynasty or stop you from getting the results you want. But he's the best there is that I've ever seen him covering every base. And, his shoes are going to be impossible to fill, but there's only one Nick Saban. And I think a lot of people who've tried to hire his assistant coaches have now understand that.
Drew, finally, you look at the Georgia Bulldogs. Are they the top contender to potentially knock off Alabama if someone's ready to do it?
Well, I do think it's Georgia's best opportunity. I think Georgia has a great football team on paper. They've got JT Daniels healthy behind center. They've got 2 running backs, Deuce White, James Cook, even Kendall Milton. They've got 3 guys. They've got a pretty good offensive line returning. They did lose George Pickens, but they've recruited well at the wide receiver position. They've got 2 big tight ends. Now they have a Reed Gilbert who they're going to get eligible. He's going to play the X spot. And they have an outstanding defense in their own right. So I do think if there's one team that could match up with Alabama and have a chance to do it, I do think it's Georgia. I don't buy Texas A&M. I haven't seen their quarterback situation evolve and see how good they are. I know they're talented defensively, but I still don't think they're Alabama. I know the game's in College Station. It's probably Alabama's toughest matchup in the regular season. But until Jimbo Fisher beats Nick Saban, I can't buy into it. So I really think in Georgia having Alabama on a neutral field in Atlanta and what's at stake. And we all know Kirby has come the closest of climbing that mountain of beating Nick Saban. I still think Georgia is the best matchup. I think their personnel is a little better than Texas A&M. I actually like LSU ahead of A&M to finish in the division. I think they're going to retool. I think Durante Jones is going to help them solve some of their defensive issues, and the new hires in Andre Carter to help their defensive line. So we'll see. And I think offensively, I like Max Johnson a lot. I like Keyshawn Butte and their tailbacks, Tyron Davis-Price and John Emery. I think LSU will finish second. I think Texas A&M third, but I think it's going to be Alabama and Georgia, and it's going to be a gargantuan matchup in Atlanta. And I do think Georgia has more than a puncher's chance. I think it's going to be one heck of a battle. I still like Alabama, honestly, but, if they can stay healthy. But there's one caveat. They've got to keep Bryce Young healthy. If Bryce Young's not healthy, Jalen Milroe is going to be dynamic, but he's not ready to be an SEC quarterback yet. Paul Tyson is not Mac Jones, so they've got to keep Bryce Young healthy if they want to repeat as national champions and SEC champs.
Drew DeArmond, Tiger Insider, joining us here on 3 and Out. Drew, appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Thank you, guys. Always enjoy being on with you.
Sir, Drew DeArmond joining us here on 3 and Out, talking some Alabama, and certainly they will be picked to make it to Atlanta again, and probably a pick by most people to make it to the college football playoff, if not win the whole thing once again. We've got more to come here on 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you here on this Thursday, Kevin, BJ, and Ben. So much to get to. Still here on the show, Jake Crane, host of the J-Boy Show, will join us to talk SEC football with him. Matt Smith will join us top of the final hour from southernpigskin.com. Chad Lunsford, Aaron Murray, still to come here on 3 and Out, as well as we talk college football. SEC Sunbelt had their media days going on today as well. But BJ and Ben, your thoughts? We haven't really had a chance to get your thoughts, both of you, on the news that was out there yesterday on Texas and Oklahoma with interest in the SEC. Now, nobody denied that they were talking, but is this just a salvo from Texas and Oklahoma that basically says, hey, we're free agents. The SEC may have gotten the first call, but could they be looking at the Big Ten or elsewhere saying we're open to move?
Potentially, and I do think points that have been made are good ones. I think this is a situation, if you were to see Texas and Oklahoma, iconic brands, major power programs go to the SEC, that would not be collectively a singular move, right? I don't think you would see Texas and Oklahoma go to the SEC and then everybody else just kind of stay pat. I think if the SEC were to go to 16 teams, there would be at least a desire for other power conferences to go to 16 teams. And what would that mean? Would the ACC go to Notre Dame and say, we need you as a full-time member? Would the Big 12 and Pac-12 try to team up? Or would the Big 12 go to Houston potentially, or a program like that, or a Boise State and say, hey, we need to bring you in? I think it would have a domino effect that would be pretty sweeping, pretty striking, pretty significant in terms of not only conference realignment, but we've talked about how, I know, Ben, you've said a number of times, had the Jimbo Fisher deal kind of reset the market for coaching contracts. If the SEC adds Texas and Oklahoma, that's going to reset the market for television contracts. I mean, you're going to have astronomical contracts that become the new standard. And I don't know, could that turn into something where if the money is so big, maybe there becomes a portion of that in a new era of amateurism that is used for paying players in some capacity? I think if this were to happen, it would be monumental. It would obviously impact the guidelines of the proposed 12-team playoff in terms of at-large bids and auto bids and whatnot. It would be a significant move that would impact every aspect of college football and college sports.
Yeah, it is going to be pretty significant. We talked about, when you talk about name and image likeness and the impact it would have on college athletics, Mark Emmert comes out and say, could this be the end of college athletics as we know it? But yeah, if Oklahoma and Texas do decide to go over to the SEC, we might be looking at something to where no more conferences, Kevin, no more conferences, BJ. And then again, it becomes who can benefit the most from it. But yeah, Oklahoma, Texas, if they can come to the SEC, the rich, once again, Kevin, have just purchased a bank.
Yeah, well, it's true. And again, I wonder, like I said, just your gut feeling. BJ, you have covered college football for a long time. Ben, you've been a part of it. What does this do for the game of college football? I don't care about, I get the argument. Oh, it's bigger, better, more money. Well, I get all that. Just for the game of college football, would you like to see super conferences, or would you like to forestall this for as long as possible?
I understand the appeal in terms of, you could have a power conference here, a power conference there. Maybe you would have a more kind of, I know you've wanted, Kevin, consistent kind of streamlined clarity for how teams make the college football playoff. But I do wonder about the impact to the rest of college football. What would happen to the group of 5 programs? What would happen to their access potentially to a playoff? If we talk about theoretically the Oklahoma and Texas combo going to the SEC and maybe the ACC adding a couple of schools in the Big Ten and the Pac-12, what happens to the rest of the Big 12? What happens to those programs? And I understand that one team leaving leagues will lead to 2, will lead to 5, will lead to 10. I understand there would be corresponding reactions to this action, but I would have some apprehension about kind of what it would do to the current landscape of Division I FBS football. Now, in terms of the SEC or athletics as a whole, in terms of the impact on the SEC, yes, you would become, Ben, to your point, you're not buying a bank, man. You're buying multiple banks. You're talking about being the new resource standard, financial standard, economic standard across the board. But I would wonder what the impact would be and how you would, I guess, maintain potentially competitive balance
in an era where, I mean, let's just fast forward a couple of years and imagine A&M or Texas and Oklahoma are in the SEC. I mean, right now in your average top 25 poll, you have what, 7 at least SEC teams in the top 25? Could you have a year if the SEC adds these 2 schools where you have 10, 12 teams in the top 25, close to half of the top 25? And what would that do to the postseason format? What would that do to the structure? What would that do? I mean, Kevin, you've made this point. If you're the SEC and you keep adding top teams, do we now look at an SEC team that's 8-5 and go, my heavens, you had a championship year? Or if you go 6-6, are you still good enough to be in the top 15 because 6 of your losses are the top 15, top 20 teams? I mean, I think it would cause a reevaluation of things on a number of fronts.
Something I was telling Kevin about, during the break, before the show, I was saying that the reason why we love college football because it's the greatest regular season there is. We know how it ends, right? We know how it ends every year, but we watch during the season, don't we? We know it's about all these different teams. I mean, it's and people going, what's going to happen is what flip phone, smartphone, what regular old TVs to plasma screen TVs, regular cars to these hybrid cars. You just adjust because at the end of the day, we just were around to see the SEC already formed. The SEC we know was not the SEC when it first started. There were teams in the ACC that started out in the SEC. I think what the SEC is doing what the people, the elite, you know what they do? They throw their money around. They throw their weight around. We get what we want because we have the prestige to do it. The SEC knows if we want Texas and Oklahoma, because Texas and Oklahoma is the only reason you watch the Big 12. You have no other reason to watch the Big 12. So they say, well, let's go ahead and get 2 teams that's used to carrying the whole load, and now they're just a part of it. I'd rather be a part of this league instead of having to be in the whole league. And look at the coaches you getting. I mean, now you got Sarkisian, you got Coach Day, but you add more to it, to this overall gigantic platform there known as the SEC. But I just think it just goes to what's going on with all the different stuff coming out, right? See how everything's coming? NIL, oh, there it is. Or Mark Emmert comes out and says, hey, man, I got to go do congressional hearings about amateurism. Why? Because it never really existed. Now now you're getting paid, Kevin, to go to class. You get an incentive for going to class? Yes. So while we doing our 12 potential team playoffs, if it ended up Oklahoma and Texas, nobody's really going to say anything because it's the SEC. Now, Oklahoma and Texas go to the ACC, oh, that's a problem. How the ACC get those 2 schools. So because they're going to the biggest conference in college football, I still think the G5 programs are still going to have to do that. You got to have one main team that's been real good for a long time. They'll still get in. But BJ and Kevin, I just think that it's just adjusting to what college football is now. It runs, I mean, it is the creme de la creme. The Southeast is where the best college football is. And Oklahoma and Texas is really going to add to this. The SEC is going to have the most guys drafted in the draft every year. Now they're adding Oklahoma and Texas. So now they're going to break the record in the first round and a half instead of the first 2 rounds. But, yeah, I mean, I think it's going to happen. I don't think that type of report would have got leaked and nobody's denying it. But, Kevin, like I said, I mean, when it comes to the SEC, I know they got it just means more. Well, now we want more of the best teams in college football.
Yeah, it's a wild news breaking there at the SEC Media Days yesterday. But our own Christian Gokel was on hand there. He had a chance to talk a little SEC football with former Auburn coach Gene Chizik there in Hoover, Alabama.
Christian Gokel at SEC Media Days 2021. Please be joined by Coach Gene Chizik. And, man, I got to ask you, historical changes in college football this year. How difficult of a job have these head coaches had the past 3, 4, 5 months?
Yeah, I think it's been a whirlwind. I think there's been so much, I don't want to call them distractions because they're all so singularly focused on football. But these are necessary changes that aren't going away. And they all need to deal with them, whether it's NIL, whether it's transfer portal, college football playoff, which they don't really concern themselves with at this point too much. But definitely the NIL and the transfer portal, things of that nature. They got to spend a lot of time on it. And so, I think it's kind of draining at some point for these guys, but it's here to stay for sure.
I was going to ask, at this point, how big is your SID staff and those lawyers in the communications department? How much are those guys leaning on that staff?
It's huge. I mean, for you to be able to take your peripheral people, your compliance people, the people that are really going to be integral parts of kind of, making this thing move forward, efficiently without screwing up. Nobody wants a misstep. And, if you're talking about the NIL, somebody being ineligible,
Right.
things of that nature that can happen. So, and everybody's trying to just kind of figure out as time goes what this looks like. I mean, could be a lot of unintended consequences that happen at the end. But right now, everybody's just trying to do their job, day by day.
Which second-year coach do you feel like is in the best position to take that next step?
I really like Eli Drinkwitz at Missouri. I really do. I like where they're going recruiting-wise. I mean, they quietly went 5-5 last year, in a 10-game SEC schedule. And I like him, man. I like him as a play caller. He's got a quarterback that's going to return for the next 3 or 4 years. I think the players really have bought in. I think they really enjoy playing for him. And I think he'll get better and better and figure things out more and more as he gets a little more experience as a head coach. But I'm definitely buying into what I see so far at Missouri.
Who's your top contender to Alabama in the West?
Right now, I would have to say, based on what we know, you'd have to say it would have to be potentially Texas A&M. And I say that because I think, although there's some question marks offensively, particularly at quarterback and on the O-line, they've got a solid defense. And I think they can kind of hold things down at the point of attack until the offense gets rolling. But Jimbo does a great job, as good as any, in developing quarterbacks. So we'll see what happens with Haynes King or whoever ends up being the quarterback there.
Eli Ricks and Derek Stingley Jr. I know you coached a lot of great LSU defensive backs. Where do you think they rank?
Well, they got to be one of the top two in the conference. In terms of production, I mean, what Stingley did 2 years ago was amazing. I think last year was kind of a mulligan for the whole defense. Things never gelled, never became what they wanted them to be. They made a lot of changes. But Stingley and Ricks, I mean, Ricks kind of had the freshman year that Stingley had the year before.
Right.
And so I think you're looking at two really, really productive guys on the perimeter for LSU, which allows the defensive coordinator to have a lot of flexibility what he does with the other 9, because those guys are going to be shut down guys.
All right. And finally, if you had to do like a Madden rating, who's the best player in the SEC?
Well, that's a good one. The best player in the SEC, I'm going to start out and say, I don't know if he's the best, but Jordan Davis has got to come to the top of the list.
It's a big man.
So it's a big 6'6", 345-pound guy that can move. He's legit.
I was going to say, if him and Evan Neal meet up in the SEC championship and they hit, there might be a crater in Atlanta.
Yeah, that'd be a lot of weight together. That'd be a lot of combustion power.
Awesome, Coach. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Gene Chiswick talking with our own Christian Gokel there at SEC Media Days, talking about, I guess, inertia and kinetic energy, essentially, when you're talking about big men running into each other. We've got much more to come here on 3 and Out. We'll hear from Jake Crane, host of the J-Boy Show, when we come back here on 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. hanging out here on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Kevin, BJ, and Ben. Glad you are with us. SEC Media Days. Auburn, obviously a lot of intrigue as to what's happening there with Auburn. And joining us here, host of the J-Boy Show, Jake Crane, joining us here on 3 and Out. Jake, welcome. How are you?
Hey, guys. Good to be back. I appreciate y'all having me on. And this is my first media day, and it's been great. And I've been down here since the first one and got some great content. And, you know, this day means we're getting close to the season, fellas, and I'm ready to kick this bad boy off like y'all are.
Hey, it certainly does. And I know Auburn, a lot of folks very excited to really start to get to know Brian Harsin and what he's going to do there with Auburn. What's the biggest way he can kind of make a splash, in your opinion, to kind of announce his presence in the SEC?
Don't fall up the escalator, first off. But, no, you know, when I look at Brian, to me, and you look at the season and coming down here, he's going to say the company line. You know, he's not going to say anything crazy when he gets down. He's going to get asked about Bo Nix and all this. You know, one way is to go out there and win. But what I'm looking at is with the personnel they have, which if you look at the new coaching hires in the SEC, he did inherit the best personnel. But how does the team react on the field? Last year, you had Bo Nix screaming at Chad Morris in the South Carolina game. How are the guys playing together? Do they look connected? Do the coaches look connected with the players? You know, how do they handle themselves? Because a lot of year one, and most of year one, is setting the foundation and the culture. Guys showing up to meetings on time. Guys not skipping reps in the weight room. Guys eating the way they're supposed to be eating. Guys understanding that you got to be eligible to play and go into class, even if it's online. Getting your work done early so you have more time to study film and stuff like that. That's what I want to see, is the pinball kind of changing to the other side, because, you know, Gus Malzahn, that ship is run pretty loose. And, you know, you're not getting paid $7 million to be their friend. And you can be a mentor and stuff like that. And you don't got to always talk about ball, but you're here to win. And you win by setting the foundation. And that's what I'm looking at year one with Coach Harsin.
Tank Bigsby, so good, so productive last year. What are the expectations for him, and how does he kind of fit into that legacy of great running backs at Auburn?
Man, I tell you what, I think he's the best back in the country. You know, and there's some great ones in the SEC. I mean, you look at Spiller, you look at A-Chain, you just go down the list. I mean, Bama's going to stay with him. Georgia's going to stay with him. I love Kendall Milton. But when I look at Tank Bigsby, he's a superstar. There's nothing he can't do. He's good in the gap scheme, which I don't think you're going to see a lot of power and counter out of Auburn this year. Going big on big, I don't think it's going to be their flavor with their personnel on the offensive line. And Tank is a great zone runner because he has unbelievable vision and he can cut on a dime, whether it's a jump cut, whether it's a stick cut, however he gets in it, he can read, press the point, and get to where he gets to. And I think he's going to be here for 2 more years, and then he's going to go to the NFL. I think he will go down as one of the best running backs Auburn has had. And look, I'm not saying he's Bo Jackson. The kid, you know, that's a different era or whatever. But to me, he has the ability to be as good as he wants to be and as good as the O-line will allow him to be.
So is it safe to say it's going to come down to the arm and maybe the mindset of Bo Nix? I know from his freshman year to sophomore year, he kind of had that sophomore slump. I know he's a guy that kind of thought that college football was a little easier than it was, winning his first ever Iron Bowl as a true freshman, kind of tailed off last year as a sophomore. What is it going to take for him to really take Auburn to levels that they want to get to? Because he's going to have to be able to do it without necessarily having some big time talent on the outside.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And look, I'm a firm believer in 2 things can be true at once. Bo Nix can be really talented. Bo Nix can need to get better in the pocket. He can need to stop throwing off platform. And the offensive line can actually give him a pocket. And the scheme can actually allow him to go through progressions. Because, Gus, here's what happened with Malzahn in his system. All right, and I'm not making an excuse for Bo Nix. This is a real thing if you're watching the game. I know you guys know this. Gus Malzahn came in the league with tempo. One of the first people to do it. He wrote a book on it. And since he was going tempo, he was catching a lot of defenses in base. So he knew who was going to be open, and you didn't have to have full field reads. Well, defenses, just like they always do, caught up. The book got out on them. They figured out what they were doing. And when you're only reading one side of the field, that's why you see Bo Nix. He'd read that first read, and it wouldn't be there because the defense knew what was going on. And he'd be like, and then just go willy-nilly and try to invent stuff. So I think what you're going to see from Mike Bobo is they're going to go under center more. They're going to get play action. It's going to be run to pass. They're going to get in multiple heavy formations, and you're going to see an actual progression from one side of the field. And you can actually throw to the tight end. And also, you can throw the check down. The 2 biggest words that Bo Nix needs to learn this year is check down, because a check down to Tank is as good a handoff to Tank. Sometimes it's even better because you're in open space. So I'm interested to see how he reacts. Because, again, guys, look at all the teams that aren't returning quarterbacks this year. Elite teams, A&M, Bama, even though Bryce Young played a little bit, I'm talking about starters, Florida. You go down the list, and Auburn returns a guy that has played 2 years in the league, and like you said, beat Bama his first year and beat Oregon his first year in his first game. So I think Bo Nix is actually going to have a pretty good year this year, but you're right. The wide receiver group is young. That's why getting Demetrius Robertson was so key, not from an on-the-field standpoint only, but from a veteran experience. This is how we have to prepare.
We're talking with Jake Crane of the J-Boy Show. And Jake, you look at the SEC West there, Auburn, where do you see them fitting in? I know a lot of people say, well, when you think Auburn's going to be down, they overperform. When you think Auburn's going to be the top, they kind of get underneath there. But looking at a bounce back from LSU, potentially A&M getting a lot of love, Ole Miss, right? Where do you think Auburn kind of realistically fits here?
I think fourth. I think it's going to be a battle with Ole Miss for fourth because, again, look, and I'll say this, Auburn's defense is going to be salty. And you're right, Auburn does better as the outsider, just like LSU does better as the outsider. That's why I think they're going to have a big year. But I think if Brian Harsin can go 8-4, that's a hell of a year. They can go to Penn State and get a win, which is a winnable game. Then you got to go from Happy Valley to Death Valley. Hey, then congratulations, guys, you get Georgia at home. So if you look at the schedule, it's never easy. And the SEC West, guys, is as deep as I've ever seen it. Now, Alabama isn't as elite as they've been, but from top to bottom, there are no weeks off.
Who do you think is the top contender to the Crimson Tide? Is it A&M or LSU?
I got LSU actually having the exact same SEC record as A&M does, but I think they beat A&M the last week of the season and finished second in the West.
The West is always going to be, leading, making sure the SEC, lives up to that reputation and persona every year. And I know that Auburn, as Kevin mentioned, every time you think they're going to do well, they don't. Every time you think they don't, they do. But Texas A&M, they got a coach in Jimbo Fisher who I think he was the first coach to get a fully guaranteed 10-year, $75 million contract. Hasn't really lived up to the billing outside of playing Clemson really, really close. His first year at A&M hasn't really been much to talk about. Is this the year A&M finally gets over the hump? And as you mentioned, bringing in a new quarterback, but Jimbo Fisher, just like a Dan Mullen, was supposed to be the quarterback whisperer.
Yeah, well, I think what he did with Kellen Mond, who I don't think was a great passer, and tried to pass to be able to get drafted in the NFL, it ended up working out. This is the same guy that got E.J. Manuel drafted in the first round. And look, A&M last year, and again, you're paying a guy $10 million a year. You expect big things. And, if you look, that Florida game last year was a really big getting over the hump game for them. It gave them a lot of momentum. And here's the difference with A&M. Because we're going to talk about offense because Jimbo's their coach. But A&M's never had a problem scoring. That hasn't been the problem. It's the defense. Last year, they had the top defense in the country. Mike Elko is one of the most underrated DCs in the country. They returned most of those guys. Marvin Leal is an absolute freak up front for them. I love Jalen Jones at corner. The guys they got in the back end, I question their speed a little bit. Edgerrin Cooper had a huge spring for him at linebacker. I think A&M has a chance to beat Alabama in the regular season this year. But I don't have that happening. I have Alabama losing to Georgia in the SEC championship and Kirby Smart becoming the first assistant to take down St. Nick.
Wow. Jake Crane, host of the J-Boy Show, our guest here on 3 and Out. Jake, appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Always, guys. Y'all do a heck of a job. Looking forward to talking again.
Thanks much. That was Jake Crane, host of the J-Boy Show, joining us here on 3 and Out. Much more to come all across. Good to be here with you on this Thursday. Kevin, BJ, and Ben, thanks for making us a part of your day. SEC Media Days going on in Hoover, Alabama this week. We'll hear from Matt Smith, SouthernPigskin.com, coming up in just a little bit. Also, Chad Lunsford at Sunbelt Media Days, and Aaron Murray, former Georgia quarterback, will join us on the program as well. Our own Christian Gokel was there at SEC Media Days. He had a chance earlier to catch up with Mississippi State head coach Mike Leach. Always entertaining interview there. Here's Christian and Coach Leach.
Coach Leach, first of all, man, we got a head coach down in our area that's former one of your players, Sean Pender, head coach down at Brunswick. Any memories of him playing wide receiver for you?
He was a great player. He wasn't just a good player. He was a great player. He's actually quite a serious guy on the field, and he was real fast. He was literally one of the best players on the team. I guess you can make the argument he was the best, but he was really good.
How ready are you to get back out on the field here in front of some full capacity stands?
I'm really looking forward to it. It's about time.
And always good to talk with Mike Leach. Had to get him real quick there, but I appreciate Mike Leach. He's my kind of guy because he goes on Twitter and he's like, I'm not wearing this suit 1 minute longer than I have to. I packed the cargo shorts and a T-shirt. As soon as this is done, I'm out of here. I heard him talking about the ties, like whoever invented ties, needs to be slapped in the face. I can appreciate that with Mike Leach.
And talking about his time at Valdosta State with Sean Pender. And you think about Sean Pender, Kev, didn't he for a while hold some Gulf South Conference records, may still hold a few, and putting up huge numbers there with Coach Leach over at Valdosta State?
Yeah, he did. Yeah. Was, I think, the Gulf South Conference all-time leader in receptions when he graduated there at Valdosta State. But, yeah, Mike Leach, I think, BJ, been one of the more interesting not only characters in the league, but to me, can he get that offense going in SEC? He kind of got off to a good start. I've heard some folks say towards the end of the year they started to get it back when he gets his personnel in there. And I think he's a guy that, much like the Moneyball situation, like, do you believe this? 100%. Then what are we talking about? I'm an air raid guy. I'm going to make it work, and I'm interested to see if Mike Leach can do just that.
I think he will. I hope he does. Because sometimes when you start thinking about what is going to be your niche in anything that you're doing, nobody's expecting Mississippi State to win the West. I know. And I saw Mike Leach when he first got to the podium. I know that Eli Drinkwitz had 16 minutes opening statements.
Brian Harsin.
Yeah. I think what happens with a guy like Mike Leach, he comes up and says, look, I'm not good with these opening speeches. You guys are going to ask whatever you want. So let's get right to it. Like, what I think of when I think of Mike Leach, I think of originality. You know what you're getting from him. He rolls to the beat of his own drum. He doesn't care about criticism. But you do hope, Kevin, you do hope that he is able to get the air raid going. Probably not going to win you a lot of games, but exciting football, I think he could definitely upset a couple of teams because the Egg Bowl is going to be what the Egg Bowl is. But Lane Kiffin was brought into to bring personality. Mike Leach was brought into it to bring a different level, a different caliber of play.
I don't know if I agree it won't win you a lot of games. It may not win you enough games in a division with Alabama, LSU, but I think he can win his share of games there, and we'll see if he can win enough games, BJ, to get him, to the promised land there in the SEC West.
Yeah, it's a tricky game you have to deal with because of that offense and then the 3-3-5 defensively. But, yeah, they're going to beat somebody they shouldn't beat this season. There's no doubt about it. Keep an eye on Will Rogers, their quarterback. Had some big games last year. Now he's got some experience. He's going to put up some points and probably going to lead lead the league in passing when you think about the production, or be right up there with Matt Corral just because of how often they throw. But, yeah, that's not a team you want to see.
Kevin, I know Mike Leach is your guy. I mean, I'm looking for him to go out there and make it happen. I mean, I just want to see exciting football. But if you play defense for Mississippi State, drink a lot of water because you're going to be on the field a lot.
Yeah, I mean, Mike Leach is one of those guys. It's a good fit, I think, for Mississippi State because you do something different. It's fun. He's got the personality to kind of roll with it. And again, I'm interested to see what the long-term kind of prospects are for Mike Leach because, again, he's been successful wherever he's been. Look at what he did for programs like Washington State and Texas Tech. I mean, he was winning with those guys. That's all you need to know about what he can potentially do. We got another hour to go. Matt Smith, SouthernPigskin.com, joins us when we come back. Chad Lunsford, final hour as well. Final hour of 3 and Out. Kevin, BJ, and Ben. We'll hear from Chad Lunsford, Georgia Southern head football coach. Also, Aaron Murray, former Georgia quarterback, will join us here on the program. We'll talk Georgia football with him. But right off the bat, from SouthernPigskin.com, covers the SEC, Matt Smith joins us. Matt, welcome once again, my friend. Obviously, the SEC leads the way, I guess. And then yesterday, the Houston Chronicles report about Texas and Oklahoma and their desire to not be in the Big 12 anymore and potentially the SEC. Your thoughts on the likelihood that actually happens, and what does that mean for college football?
Yeah, far be it from the SEC to trump the SEC in terms of news. They just go blow up their own media days with their own big story. So crazy. Yeah, that was quite a shocker yesterday. I'd say it's more likely to happen than not at this point. You know, we did see it go to the brink back in 2010 with the Pac-16 or the Big Pac-16, whatever it was called back then. And we were able to pull back from that. But I think it's pretty unlikely at this point. We know that the bylaws has been reported requires the league to have 11 of the 14 teams approve it. I'm sure A&M is very much against it. I think there might be some other schools that aren't huge fans, but they may just go along with the league, take a unified stance. So, you know, I think it happens. It's, you know, not something I'm a big fan of. As you know, I'm the old curmudgeon, get off my long guy who wants the 10 and 12 team conferences and making bowl deals in the back of smoky rooms and such. But this is a big step forward. It's hard to imagine what the landscape of college football will look like should this happen. I guess we've always talked about the possibility for 4 super conferences. I'm wondering if it's even going to be that. If it might just be 3, and then the Pac-12 is kind of on its island in a second tier, and then the leftovers from the Big 12 kind of merge in more of an AAC type league. I don't know. It's a lot to play out, but in terms of the likelihood to happen, I think it's definitely more likely than not at this point.
I know you literally just said, I don't know, but I still have some questions anyway for you, Matt. Do you think if this were to happen and the SEC would go to 16, that would further motivate the ACC and Notre Dame to come to an agreement to potentially add 2 more teams to the ACC, Notre Dame being one? And if this does happen, does the proposal that I know is not yet finalized, but does the 12-team playoff with the 6 auto bids and all like that totally get reworked as well?
Yeah, I guess to the first question, BJ, I think it may somewhat depend on what the Big Ten does. Would they in any way, shape, or form see Kansas as an appealing product? Obviously not for football, but you do get the basketball and not a ton of other places to turn in terms of new markets that would be logical fits, both culturally, academically, and athletically for the league. And the ACC and Notre Dame kind of have an agreement, whether you call it written or unwritten, that should something happen and the need to expand again and the need for Notre Dame to break away from an independent program, that would be their natural home. So I think they can kind of just sit tight and wait for this thing to totally blow up and then just dot some I's and cross some T's to make that happen. So I think they'll kind of sit back and wait. But I think the initial pressure, should this happen, is on the Big Ten. And what do they do with any of the leftovers? Do they think getting to 16 to match the SEC is a must, kind of like they did last time when they added Rutgers and Maryland, and that didn't really work out super well? So they might just be content with 14. So I wouldn't see that happening, except as, again, kind of the final step in this process of moving to all super conferences. And your second question, the playoff. I don't know. It would kind of feel like almost the college baseball tournament, where you have 7 or 8 of the top 16 as SEC teams. And if you're having 5 or 6 SEC teams in the 12-team football playoff, like how much is, I always complain about the impact on the regular season as we expand the playoff further and further. But what's that going to do if you're getting a 5th or 6th place SEC team in the playoff? What are we watching all these games for when an 8-4, 9-3 team can get in just because they played so many superpowers? You still got to win games. That's what the beauty of the sport is. I think they'd have to revisit it to some extent, but there's no automatic bids for like the Big 12 based on how it was worded in terms of just taking the top 6 conference champions. So I think it could stay somewhat as is, but I'm sure they'll relook at that as if these couple of steps do happen.
And Maddie, I mean, like you mentioned, the SEC doesn't need any more prestige than it did, but does that kind of, being a former college player, I never ever think that nothing is a surprise when it comes to these conferences. It's a surprise to us. I mean, people go, I remember when Texas A&M and Missouri first came over to the SEC and people was thinking, why? Like, why Texas A&M? Why Missouri? I mean, do you think that was kind of like foreseeing the future? Listen, we really want Texas. We really want Oklahoma, but we know we can't get them right now. Did you see like maybe a move back then, kind of like shapes of what's going on now, especially when you Oklahoma and Texas saying, we tired of being, the heavyweights of the Big 12. We rather share the load instead of having to carry the whole load.
Yeah, I mean, I think they definitely, that was in play back then. And if I ever am fortunate enough to cross the pearly gates and have a conversation with Mike Slav again, I'd love to get more on just how interested Oklahoma was back at that time, because I'm sure they would have preferred them over Missouri. But that thing was able to be held together. But Oklahoma's always been the school you point to. I mean, they're such a cultural fit in the SEC. Norman reminds you so much of other college towns. And I think Texas, Oklahoma, this is clearly financial. That would be a huge boost for them to get in the SEC, and that's probably the main driving factor there. With Texas, I mean, I don't think it's really a huge financial thing. They have the ridiculous Longhorn Network contract for the next, 15 years or so, I think it is, with the ESPN. I think there may have just been kind of a shift in mindset of Texas. Back when they wanted to go to the Pac-12, I think some of the power brokers there felt they were a better fit with some of the Pac-12 schools. Your Cals, your USCs, your Stanfords and such. But as a decade has gone by and Texas has become pretty irrelevant in both major sports, I didn't follow much college hoops this year, but I think they had a pretty good year and then maybe bombed out in the postseason. But they've really done nothing basketball or football wise since that first round of expansion. So I think athletics is becoming a bit more of a priority. Not that it wasn't before, but I think going to the SEC, they think could maybe rejuvenate both their major sports. So I think it might be more about that. So, yeah, I think we definitely saw this coming, but I'd love to know just how close it was for Oklahoma 10 years ago, because, again, they've been the one school throughout the whole last 10 or 15 years about what can trigger another huge round of realignment and expansion. It's Oklahoma, and I think we thought in the middle of the decade we'd be dealing with this, but it just so happens it's 4 years earlier, kind of like the playoff, just bigger and sooner than we thought.
Matt, finally, we got about 2 minutes or so here left. College football, obviously, we look at it as just this cash cow, and it certainly is, needless to say. And I've asked this to a number of folks, and I know you're very thoughtful when it comes to college football and its place in the sports world. And is it possible to kill the golden goose here? Because it seems like with the fan loyalty, the pageantry, the money, the dollar, like people seem to think like you can't ruin this thing. Would that kind of be the first straw to potentially ruining college football or killing the golden goose, so to speak, when it's just too consolidated?
Yeah, I mean, this is really the first time over the last couple of months worry is a strong word. It's a sport, for God's sake, but consider what my interest in this sport will be 10 years down the road. I'll still like it, but it doesn't feel the same way it did. And maybe part of that's just growing older and becoming more cynical and realize what actually is driving this machine. And as you said, it's all cash, but that's kind of gone, on speed the last 10 or 20 years with how fast the coaching contracts go up, how fast the TV deals are going up. So yeah, I would tread lightly. There's always been a uniqueness to college football. It's not for everybody. Some people hate it and just love the NFL because they think it's weird in the bowls and it makes no sense because it's unique. But that's what drew a lot of people into the sport. And as you move the format of this sport more and more closer to professional sports and how every other sport is run, it loses that unique place amongst the major sports. And I do think that's a risk. It's not going to go away, but it's clear number 2 right now. And I could definitely see it sliding back, 10 years down the road. If we lose some of that, it's always been a regional sport. And as we expand conferences from Austin to Lexington, Kentucky, I think you lose some of that. So it is something to keep an eye on, Kevin. That's a good point. And like I said, I do kind of worry about the true diehards and passionate college football fans, maybe losing a little bit of that over the next decade.
Matt Smith, SouthernPigskin.com. Matt, always a pleasure. Thanks so much. We'll talk again soon.
Thank you, guys. See ya.
Matt Smith, always a pleasure talking to him. SouthernPigskin.com is, again, this expansion talk. BJ, I don't think it's going to go away, especially with administrators saying, I'm just focused on the 2021 season, which is not no, we're not interested in that kind of statement.
it does feel like there's a lot of possibility here. I mean, I know with these early news stories, it's almost, do you believe it? Do you not believe it? I know Matt said there feels more likely than not that it's going to happen. And that's kind of what my gut reaction is, that this would be a lot if there was nothing there. And you're getting more and more reports, but a lot to determine, a lot to find out, and a lot of potential unknowns out there.
Perception is definitely driving reality. And the thing about it is, I mean, people's like, how much money is enough money? More. You know, how much prestige is enough? More. I think when you start thinking about the SEC, they throwing their weight around. I mean, if Oklahoma and Texas, they're, quote, flirting. No, this is about to be a full-blown relationship here real soon, because look at how much they can benefit from each other. I do agree with Matt. I mean, we're getting farther and farther away from what we grew and know to love for college football. But listen, players can make money now, both male and female. So it's not going to be the college football that we grew up knowing. But at least we get to say, and back in our day when they wasn't making no money, but those days are long gone, and they're going to be, coming to an end with the SEC maybe sooner rather than later.
BJ and I will be walking around with our walkers going, I remember when the ACC had 8 teams in it. It's 3 and Out. We got more to come. Chad Lunsford, we'll hear from him next. Aaron Murray still to come. 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Here on 3 and Out, the head football coach of the Georgia Southern Eagles, Chad Lunsford, stepping in here. Coach, welcome to the show. How are you?
Oh, doing great today. How are y'all?
Hey, we're doing fantastic. I know heading through this offseason, getting ready for a full 2021. What's kind of the sense you've got from your team here early, just a couple of weeks out from fall practices?
I think our team's in a great place. I think they've got a great mindset. They have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder right now because there's not a lot of people outside of our program, university, and fan base that believe that we can do what we can do. And I think they just they want to prove the world wrong. So want to go out and shock the world this year.
I was going to say, Coach, do you guys talk about some of the expectations or projections, or when you talk about motivation or kind of getting ready for the season, is it just an internal focus and that's where the talking points come from?
Well, before you come to Georgia Southern, when you get recruited, and then once you get there, the expectations are instilled in you, and we don't. If we get a feel like a recruit doesn't understand that, then we try to move in a different direction. So our guys understand what it means at Georgia Southern that losing one football game is not tolerated, and so they're already in that mindset. But then on top of it, to get voted and lower and not a lot of expectations from the outside world with us, it obviously can fuel the fire for us.
And Coach, I mean, how do you maintain that healthy balance? I mean, I know when I was in college, my coach used to always tell me, don't look at the newspaper clippers. You're never as good as they say you are. You're never as bad as they say you are. And obviously, in a social media driven world today, everything is clickbait. How do you make sure your guys maintain that healthy balance of, one, being voted lower than you want to be, but two, understanding our goals are still ahead of us?
Well, I think that if you ignore it, that social media is a real thing, and you say, well, don't pay attention to it, don't do this, don't do that, you're probably being unrealistic because that's the way the world has moved. That's where the information is given. However, I think it's important that, one, you're always teaching the core value of humility and how to handle yourself. But I think you're going down the wrong road if you sit there and say, well, our guys won't pay attention to this, they won't look at this. I think there's times where you have to address things, but I think there's also times where you ignore things. And I think all that ends up being a case-by-case thing for our guys.
Is here on 3 and Out. I know with you there at the Sun Belt Media Days, you brought your running back, J.D. King. How big is it going to be for you guys, hopefully having him healthy for an entire season?
J.D. King's a workhorse, and that guy right there, he's special. He's different. And I don't know if I've ever seen anybody attack an all-season rehab like he did. He's on a mission. He wants to be the best J.D. King he can be. And all indications of watching all-season training by him, I think he's going to come back better than ever.
Coach, what are your expectations for your quarterbacks getting ready for fall camp?
Well, right now that we'll be going into a year where we don't have a 4-year starter anymore. And so it's time for that next man up. It's time for a guy to come in and make sure that they are the guy. In our offense, I mean, you got to have a quarterback that can be physical and run the football, but also to be able to throw the ball and be efficient in the pass game so that we can open up the run game and dominate the run game. So it's time for someone to step up and be the next guy, and right now, JT Tomlin would be the guy. If we played tomorrow, he'd be the starter. But we do have some talent in that room with a young Sam Kennerson, a true freshman in Cameron Ransom, and then we have a transfer from Army in Quincy Bonner. So we're really looking forward to preseason camp and seeing what all those guys can do for us.
Coach, 2020 was such a crazy year for everybody, and your team included. When you look at you guys not having, barely having enough guys for the opening game last year, all the adversity they had to deal with, nobody in the stadium during these games. What is it going to be like to have a packed Paulson Stadium and that rampant fan base in Statesboro, Georgia Southern? They come out in a big way. How good is it going to feel just kind of getting back to normalcy?
Oh, man, I tell you what, we're excited about that. A lot of our selling point with our recruits when, our guys that are on our team and when they were getting recruiting was the game day atmosphere. and having the ability to go back to 100% capacity and, what we call the power of Paulson. I mean, we got the fourth best winning percentage in all of FBS at a home stadium, and so that's real. And, our guys understand the expectation of what we need to do at home, and being able to feel that power, being able to feel that energy from our fan base will definitely win us some football games.
Chad Lunsford joining us here on 3 and Out. And Chad, you're there at Sunbelt Media Days. How do you feel about the Sunbelt Conference? You talked about some of those preseason expectations, but where do you feel this conference is? I know the last few years, some big time upsets from just about everybody in the conference there in the non-conference play.
I'm going to tell you, man, I've always said this. I think the Sunbelt Conference is a great conference. We got a lot of great coaches. We got a lot of great players. It is something that, I don't know if it gets the national attention it deserves. Obviously, with the success of Coastal and Louisiana last year, we started to get a little bit of that, I guess, people taking notice of us. And, so I think it's only going to get better from here. But it is a quality league. You got to come to play each and every week because, there are good coaches and good players in this league.
And Coach, talk about this schedule where you have those big time conference games in your division. Obviously, you're talking about Louisiana and Arkansas State from over in the West, and then the non-conference is just loaded. I mean, you're talking about one of the most impressive schedules in terms of who you guys are going to play in the country. Some big showcase games. What's the excitement level like getting ready for a schedule like this?
Well, I think the schedule blends very well to having a packed stadium because. When you start looking at our home games and you look at the possibility of being a few ranked teams that are going to be coming in, obviously teams that have won, played in or won bowl games, and then also too having BYU coming to our place, it's obviously going to drive, to even better crowds. And that's hard to say because it's usually great crowds anyway. But especially after last year not having the ability to be 100%, I think that's huge. And then even the schedule, the away games, the ability to play App State on a Saturday at the end of the year on a rivalry weekend. I think that's great for college football because that is an underrated rivalry game in our country, and so that'll be another opportunity to showcase that.
And Coach, I know when it comes to the players, it's all about getting 1% better every single day, trying to win the day, trying to be 1-0 after every single game. What are you working on as a head coach? I know you put a lot of pressure on yourself to go out there and be the best coach you can, but I mean, got some years under your belt, Coach. You understand you building that culture up is about as good as you can build it when you talk about what's going on at Georgia Southern. But what is Coach Lunsford working on going into your fourth full year?
Well, I think the big piece, if you break it down in a little bit of segments, I think for defense, we got to continue to grow. We've had a lot of great continuity as a defensive staff. We've got a bunch of guys that really understand our defense. And I think that we'll be able to go out and even expand our defense even more and really play fanatical. Special teams is something that we've hung our hat on at Georgia Southern. We was not in special teams as good as we wanted to be last year. So there's a little bit of a chip on our shoulder to get back to that level. And then offensively, we made some changes. We're going to be more of an attacking style. We're still going to run the option. We'll be spread gun option, but we're going to be more attacking, and not, obviously time of possession is important to us because we want to be able to dominate the run game and keep the ball away from the other team. But we're going to attack and try to go score more points. And then, the biggest piece I think is the team culture, what we call the brotherhood here. I want to concentrate on that chemistry. We're in a good place as a football team right now. Our guys are in a mindset, but we got to understand that it's going to, that mindset's got to stay through the full course of a season. That's going to have some ups and downs. There's always going to be bumps in the road, and it's all about being able to respond correctly in those things. So as a head football coach, I've got to make sure I'm out in front with that.
Chad Lunsford, our guest here on 3 and Out, head football coach of Georgia Southern. Opening game September 4th against the Gardner-Webb. Coach, really appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Thank y'all on GATA.
Chad Lunsford joining us here on 3 and Out. We'll come back with more all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Glad you are with us here. SEC Media Days rolling right along, and joining us here, one of the greats at the University of Georgia, left as the SEC's all-time passing leader. Aaron Murray joins us here on 3 and Out. Aaron, welcome to the show. How are you?
Doing good, man. Thanks for having me on today.
Appreciate you coming on. You know, Georgia took their turn at SEC Media Days. Just before we get into some of the other things, where do you feel the Dogs are at here with all the preseason expectations and certainly the championship hype that surrounds them?
Boy, they definitely deserve it, man. They got a heck of a roster heading into this season. They have a quarterback who I'm excited about with JT. I mean, let's not forget the kid battling an ACL injury from off last season. Really wasn't his job. It was, he was a scout team quarterback for the first part of the season as he continued to rehab, and then took over and looked great the fifth year. So the fact that he is now the guy, has had the spring as the starters, get to work with the starters, summertime to continue his leadership inside that locker room, and then a normal fall camp. I'm looking for big things from this offense. I mean, they got playmakers on the outside, deep at running back as they always are. That obviously been known as RBU, and Todd Monken in his second season as OC. So I think this offense is really going to open things up a lot to go along with a very talented defense. I mean, their front seven with Jordan Davis kind of anchoring that front line with some key pieces added in the transfer portal to the secondary. It's a tough team, man. And you look at the rest of the SEC East, it's down. I mean, SEC West got better this year. Ole Miss, Mississippi State's going to be better. LSU should be improved. A&M's going to be a good team, especially on the defense side of the football. Alabama's Alabama. But when you look at the East, it's Georgia. And then there's a significant drop to who is that number 2 team. Is it Kentucky? Is it Missouri? Is it Florida? Time will tell. I think if Emory Jones proves to be a dude at quarterback, a guy that, can really flourish under Dan Mullen, then they're a contender. But right now it's Georgia and kind of everyone else in the SEC. So got to get to their first game versus Clemson. I don't think it hurts them regardless win or loss. If they do end up losing that game, if they win, obviously it springboards them forward for the rest of the year. But it's a pretty nice schedule for the Dogs for the rest of the year on their way to hopefully Atlanta.
Aaron, when you watch JT play, what impresses you the most about his game?
He takes care of the football. He's accurate. He gives his guys an opportunity to make plays. I think you saw last year, one of the big things that guys were upset about, or fans were upset about in the season, was too many balls were overthrown. Just give the guys an opportunity to make a play. When JT took over at quarterback, was it perfect every time? Was he hitting the guys perfectly in stride where they could catch it and continue down the field? No. Not always, but he gave them an opportunity to go up there and win 50-50 balls. And more times than not, it was a catch. It was a 40-yard catch. And a lot of times it was a continuous catch and continuation, get some yards after the catch as well. So he understands touch. He understands timing. He takes care of the football. And he's a really cerebral dude. I mean, you talk to the guys on the staff, you talk to players on our team. He knows the offense in and out, which is pretty impressive for a guy who has limited reps in it. Early on in his career under Todd Monken. So I think he has all the stuff that you want for a quarterback. Obviously not the most athletic guy, but he gets the ball out on time. And like I said, he takes care of the football, doesn't give it to the other team. So if he can do that, along with that defense, then it's going to be a tough team to beat.
And Aaron, even sticking with JT Daniels, obviously he's a guy that's definitely going to get in the film room to make sure he knows what's going on. Being able pre-snap reads is something that he's definitely excelling at. But you're a guy that played the position at the highest level. You played at Georgia. You are the all-time leading passer. In SEC history. What is it like? I mean, everybody talks about wanting to play at Georgia, wanting to be a Georgia Bulldog. But you were a guy that was under center, between the hedges. What is that feeling like when everybody else can only watch you? And it has to have, and at what point did you get comfortable in your career to say, all right, I understand not just the offense, but my role on this entire team?
Probably heading into my second year, you really get a good comfort level and command of the offense. And it's a lot of a working relationship with Bobo at the time, who was my OC. And I talked to JT actually yesterday here at SEC Media Days, and he's like, man, listen, Monken and I see the same thing. We both have a great feeling for the offense. Defense is what we're looking for, what plays are going to work, all that good stuff. So that relationship to me sounds like it's heading in the right direction where there's going to be a lot put on JT's plate and he's going to be able to handle it. But you grow used to kind of, being somewhat quote unquote the man on campus. And, for JT, a guy coming from the West Coast, it was definitely shocking for him. I mean, you're the quarterback of an SEC team. you have to represent yourself both on and off the field, and you have to do the right things. And for me, I was really involved with Extra Special People, an organization there at Georgia, and was able to use that to then get a part of the Good Works team with AFCA. So those are opportunities that you can take advantage of giving back to the community, being a part of it, helping out, whatever it is with COVID relief, whether it's with high school mentorship, racial injustice, all that good stuff. Use your platform to springboard yourself, and it really helps your causes. And I think that's to him. He's doing that. A bunch of the guys on the team are doing that, using their social media to really get out there and just show people, hey, listen, we're football players, and that's great, but we also have side passions. And you're seeing that with NIL. You're seeing that with the Good Works team. People get out there and doing good stuff in the community. And I think as a quarterback for Georgia, that's something that he's looking forward to as well.
Aaron Murray joining us here on 3 and Out. And Aaron, obviously Alabama, Nick Saban have been kind of the gold standard there in college football in the SEC. Talk about how much they lost from last year, and it seems like they're still overwhelmingly going to be the pick to be the favorite in the SEC. How do they continue just to do it when, Alabama's got the cachet, but there's a lot of schools in the SEC that have that kind of appeal to play in the SEC high-level football. How does Nick Saban just keep doing it?
He gets guys to believe in. If you're a recruit or if you're someone on campus and you see how many guys get drafted, guys winning Heisman trophies, guys winning different awards, top 10 picks, first round picks, it's hard to not buy in and drink the Kool-Aid. When you're a recruit there and you're a 4 or 5 star and you're going to have to compete against 4 and 5 stars every single day in practice, that's only going to make you better. And that's why it's so easy for them to plug and replace. You lose a first round pick at quarterback, receiver, whatever it is, you got a bunch of 4 and 5 star guys that have been busting their tails to take over because they know, hey, all I need is 1 or 2 years as a starting quarterback or receiver or running back or cornerback at Alabama under Nick Saban, and there's a good chance I'm going to win a championship, an individual award, and have a chance to play in the NFL. So those guys are drinking the Kool-Aid, they're working their tails off, and you can't doubt Nick Saban. And he's built a culture of competition, and that's what it is. It is a culture of competition with elite athletes and guys that elite coaches, lots of coaches. He has an army of dang coaches, and it's absolutely incredible, all working for one common goal. So it's awesome to see, and it really makes it hard for everyone in the SEC to kind of keep up with them.
If there is one, I guess, who is the top contender in your mind out west to Alabama?
To me, it's LSU. I know a lot of people are high on A&M, and I love A&M's defense. I love what A&M has to run at the running back position. But, in 2021, if you don't have a quarterback, it's going to be hard to win. We've seen the past few years, you have to have a dude back there at quarterback making plays. And, I'm a big fan of Max Johnson at LSU. I like Miles Brennan. I think the nod, in my mind, goes to Max. It's going to be a really interesting competition between those two in fall camp. But they give them the opportunity to go out there and win. So, if A&M can find their guy at quarterback, someone that can lead them and take over for what Kellen Mond left behind last year, then it could be A&M. But right now, LSU got a lot of talent, especially in the secondary with Stingley there. They have top 2 guys probably in the SEC at the quarterback position, which you need against these offenses. And they have probably a top 5 quarterback as well, whether it's Miles Brennan or Max Johnson. So that gives me a little bit more confidence. Those guys are ready to rebound after a so-so performance last season.
And Aaron, you talked a lot about when obviously you representing the Good Works team. I was blessed enough to be able to talk with Stinchcomb not too many years back, talking about the Good Works team. Just talk about how the Good Works team gives you an opportunity to really, see a different side of the student athlete, really see the person, and second part is NIL. How has that changed the role of the student athlete, moving forward, not just in football, but in general?
I think that's the great thing about student athletes nowadays is they have a tremendous platform, and a lot of it is through social media. I didn't have Instagram and Twitter really got going, I think, about midway through my college career. So these guys are able to, you saw it last year with, Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence. Those guys got out in front of their communities and said, hey, listen, whether it's with COVID, whether it's with racial injustice, we're making a stand, and they're using their platform to go out there. So I think it's obviously great for NIL, and I think it's for Allstate and the Good Works team it's a tremendous opportunity, and it just sheds more light onto their cause. For me, when I was named to this team back in 2012, it brought attention to extra special people, the organization I work with and still work with to this day. We actually had our 3rd annual golf tournament this past Monday. Raised a ton of money for the organization to help send kids to camp over the summer. It allows them to shed light on whatever their cause is, which is the great thing about the Good Works team, what they're doing. And then with NIL too, it's just for these kids to continue to be authentic, whether it's, you like to hike or read or cook. I know there's a bunch of chefs or wannabe chefs. You like to golf, whatever it is, be authentic, play video games, be authentic to yourself. That way you can create those relationships with those companies. And it's just a really, really cool relationship. So I'm happy for these kids. I'm a little jealous. I'm not going to lie that they're making all these money. Nick Saban come out yesterday saying that Bryce Young's making 7 figures and all that stuff. And I talked to JT Daniels a bunch about it, and he's like, man, my social media is being blown up by these companies. So, they got to be smart about it. They have to obviously prioritize their time and schedule and understand that, hey, we are still student athletes first. You got to get the job done in the classroom, got to get the job done in the football, on the field, in the meeting rooms, all that stuff. And these opportunities will come from there.
Aaron Murray, our guest here on 3 and Out, representing the All-State AFCA Good Works team. Aaron, always a pleasure catching up. Thanks so much.
Of course. Thank you, guys. Have a great week.
That's Aaron Murray, former Georgia quarterback, joining us here on 3 and Out. That's going to do it for us here on the show. If you missed any portion of the show, go to ESPNCoastal.com for a podcasted version of the show. Braves and Phillies coming up next. First of a 4-game series. We'll see you tomorrow. 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network.